Hello again, this is Charlie Bellefontaine, and you're listening to the Home Buyers Hour on WCPT AM 820, where the facts matter. And I have one sick puppy that's remotely with us. His name is Joey Matthews, so we're not going to be picking on him too much. But Joey, if you don't mind, give us a quick update. How do people get hold of you when you're healthy and you get a lot of questions? And thank you for really taking one for the team and being here.
Hey, no worries. So, Joey Matthews, NMLS 1330694, the VA Loan Nerd. You can call me 630-235-2405 or text anytime, or find me across all the social medias at the VA Loan Nerd on everything.
I love it. And I love you, Joey, so much. But seriously, man, it sounds like I'm listening to a Sopranos episode, and I'm afraid somebody's going to get hurt.
I did work at Cicero for 10 years, so
amen to that. In the studio with us, we have Patrick Loftus. Patrick, can you give us a quick introduction on how people get hold of you?
My name is Patrick Loftus, as Charlie said. You can get a hold of me at 773-632-8330. I'm a real estate lawyer with Loftus Law.
Outstanding. And this show is about real estate. And our guests, we try to bring in what I consider a high-end real estate agent, somebody that really values what they do, and they're true buyer advocates. This week, our real estate agent has been in the business for over 7 years. She works with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, and the unique thing about this agent is she's actually an author of 2 books. 1, Historic Illinois, and 2, Chicago's Historic Hyde Park. I'd like to welcome Susan O'Connor Davis to our show. Susan, if you don't mind, give us a little bit more about you, and we're going to talk a lot about those books.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Charlie, you've given a good overview. I've been with Berkshire Hathaway for about 7 years, and I got into the business after writing a book that took me about 7 years about 2 historic neighborhoods on the city's south side. And I had all these houses dancing in my head after the book was completed and thought this might be a good offshoot to get into it. And it's been a wonderful journey thus far.
When it comes to the architecture, I think is the right word, of the city of Chicago, and it's vast. It's all over different avenues, and I always like to know the why. What motivates somebody to do this? What made you want to go and do so much research, and there is a lot of research in this book, and put all this in writing? What made you do that?
The idea came to me when we constructed our house in Kenwood. We bought the last vacant lot that was owned by the University of Chicago in, I think it was 1998, and decided to build a house. We hired John Vinci, Vinci Hamp Architects, who's absolutely terrific. And when you undergo this process, they do this, where they drill down to see if there had been anything on the site previously. And a neighbor who lived to the south of us at the time had said that there had been a house there.
Wow.
That had been torn down in error. That a professor came home one afternoon, and there was a crane taking down this place.
No way.
Well, that's what I thought too. I'm like, that's crazy. However, when I started just looking into that piece of it, there was a demolition permit entered for the same address 1 block over.
Oh, my
and
God.
That led credence to it. However, when we did these little excavations to see if there really was in fact anything there previously, nothing turned up. We didn't find, an old oil tank or anything like that. Fast forward, we moved into this wonderful home, and every spring, as the soil loosens, pieces of an older house would come to the surface. And it happens to this day. A shard of a plate or bathroom tiles have been coming up lately. So it struck me that we clearly weren't the first people to make our home in this particular place. And I went off with that concept.
No, I love it. And, it's amazing. I mean, if you're watching us on YouTube, and we do record these and broadcast live on YouTube every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, you're going to see Patrick with the big grin on his face, and me as well. And now you're going to end up seeing Susan with that same smile on her face. It's totally cool stuff. I'm a nerd. I'm sorry to admit it. When it comes to historic homes, I'm a nerd. I live in something that was built around 1900 at the turn of the century, and we did a gut and everything else, but we kept the foundation. We kept some of the first floor framing and some of the second floor framing, and then we expanded from there. But I never even thought, and it's funny too, when we talk about historic homes, we're talking about something that's 100, 150 years old, maybe 200 years old. But yet, I've been to Greece and they got stuff there that's 2,500, 3,000 years old. And you start wondering what really is historic when it comes to it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, they say in Europe, 100 years is nothing, whereas here, 100 years is a long time. Whereas here, 100 miles is nothing, but there, 100 miles is a long distance. Mm-hmm. I actually the place I live in was built in 2005.
Okay, so a little
terrible,
less historic,
terrible.
but give it time. It'll get there. All right.
That sounded funnier in my head than it turned out to be.
I think it was very funny. So tell me more about, choose one of those books again. So let's go with the Chicago's Historic Hyde Park. I like that book because it's ginormous, all right? And it's got pictures in it. 7 years of the making to get that. One of those projects had to stand out for you, though, doing the research on one or two of those. Pick one for me, please.
Picking one is very hard.
I know.
It's very, very hard.
Who's your favorite child?
I only have one. That's an easier question. Hey, Jordan.
I want to answer that, too. I have 5 children, and yes, whichever one of you is listening right now, you are my favorite. I want you to know that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, there's such a spectrum of what's available in Hyde Park and Kenwood, and just a little bit of background. It started out really as a suburb of the city of Chicago, and it was annexed in 1889, and the Columbian Exposition and the founding of the University of Chicago really exploded the population that was there. But if you have your eyes open and you walk through the neighborhood today, you can find, one of my favorites is this very charming Carpenter Gothic one-room house that's tucked in the back behind a hotel and has become, I understand, the dining room for a house that was built in 1872. And there were these guides at the time by landscape architects and home builders that this style became very important in American taste, and that's tucked away there. And that lies in contrast to, the house that I was speaking about, that John Vinci designed, which is, a very different scale, yet also very simple. And there's this just marvelous layering. So when you say that there's one, that's a hard question for me.
Well, let me ask a different question.
Huh?
When we were speaking earlier, you talked about how there are certain requirements in terms of what you can really put there. They want it to fit the neighborhood. Maybe I'm curious, how difficult was that to make that happen in 1998, around that area, as opposed to contemporaneous with when the rest of the neighborhood was built?
Well, throughout the neighborhood. If we go from 1858 to today, there's been construction throughout. Hyde Park is not landmarked. Kenwood is landmarked. That happened.
What does that mean? Go into the detail just in case anybody's listening doesn't know.
The south side of Chicago underwent great transformation middle of last century, and a lot of these historic structures were torn down. The Hyde Park community actually had to destroy about 20% of itself in order to be able to move forward. So in 1978, the Kenwood neighborhood experienced an event that was kind of a catalyst for this, and that was a developer was going to buy the Julius Rosenwald Mansion, which is this huge house on an immense parcel of land, well over an acre, and put in townhouses in the backyard. And people were like, that's just destroying the character of what we have here.
Yeah.
And so today...
I would tend to agree with them.
Yes. Today you can walk by that and see it as it was when Julius Rosenwald lived there in 1903. So what it means is that you can't tear down anything that's currently within the the Kenwood Landmark District, nor can you do anything on the facade to change the appearance of what that house is. That covers things that might have been there in 1871. It also covers things that were built, for example, Berkshire and Goldberg did a couple houses in the 30s. So even though they're outside of this historic period of time, that layering that I keep mentioning is very important. If you want to do anything on the interior of the house, you're free to do that. And in terms of the process, I'm
sure it's pleasurable.
That's one word for it, yes. There's one word. There's a number of layers you have to go through. In our personal sense, we wanted a Chicago architect. John is an architectural historian. You might be familiar with him with his work with Richard Nickel. They photographed the stock exchange coming down and tried to salvage a lot of that. But he's a modernist at heart. And so to try to build what we wanted to build, his vision of it in this historic district, met with, you might say, some controversy at times. We had to go through a local neighborhood group and get their approval, and then we had to go to landmarks. And that was a little bit trickier.
So basically everybody has to approve what you want to build, right?
Correct.
So it's like a homeowners association on steroids, it sounds like to me.
It's a small community, and so you want to be respectful of what's there. So John
Absolutely.
really tried to use materials that were reflective of the quality of what was built a century ago,
Nice.
But do it in a way that was fresh and modern.
Now, is that like a legal process as well? I guess I'm aiming this at both of you, Patrick and Susan. Is there, when you go through this whole historic thing, I mean, is this something you need an attorney for, or is this something
Yes.
Well,
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, you definitely do. And you need a good, strong architect, because one of the comments from Landmarks about what we wanted to build was that there was no third floor on it, which throughout the neighborhood they refer to it as this tripartite design. And a lot of those third floors are ballrooms. So I don't know about you, but we didn't need one of those.
No?
Why not?
No, we did
Yeah.
not need that. We did not need that. So we managed to navigate the process by John showed the massing and the scale of the house was appropriate for the neighborhood.
Nice. Patrick, did you ever get involved in any of those things?
No.
That was quick and easy coming in there.
They don't come up very often,
No.
honestly, because there's, one of the requirements of a landmark district is you can't tear anything down.
Yeah.
So there aren't that many opportunities to build something of new construction, although it does happen.
Yeah, I would think if I were in your shoes, I would want to retain the services of someone who has probably more relationships within the city of Chicago than I have. So, I have many strengths, but one of my strengths, unfortunately, does not include close relationships with government officials. So.
No, and those houses are not small either. Those things are. I mean, what's the average square footage of those? I'm going to guess 6, 7.
Yes, probably.
Somewhere in there, about 7,000 square feet.
And they can get up to 10 and beyond. But
And do you remember, like when you met with our first? I think it's the first transaction we ever worked together on. And you corrected me. I thought I was next door to Michelle and Barack Obama's house, but I was 2 doors down.
correct.
And I mean, it was intimidating. We're talking porticos. We're talking, where they parked the horses and the carriages, and I had to send, I think, 5 inspectors on something like that. And we were still there for a long time and had to go back again.
Yes, that was the Goodman Mansion of the Goodman Theater. And they did have a ballroom on the 3rd floor. That was also a theater. And that's where a lot of plays were put on in that house. It eventually became a school. I think it was called the Normal School of Education in the 1930s, because what happened to these places is, I think that one is 17,000 square feet.
It's a lot of house.
It's a lot
It's
of
a lot
house.
of house.
It's a lot of house, and it was particularly a lot of house in the 1930s because, an architect strives for 40-year service life for most of the building, meaning you don't need a new roof or anything for that period of time. So what happened to a lot of these old places was We had the First World War, we had the Depression, right at the time that these houses were getting to be 30 and 40 years old and needing investment. There was also flight outside of the neighborhood, and so a lot of these old places got divided into rooming houses, in which case, there could be 10 families living in one place without any upgrading to the electric or the plumbing, and
or egress safety, I'm sure.
none of that. And then others were bought for institutional purposes, and that was one. But it's a magnificent, magnificent house.
And it's unique, too, with the changes in construction. And this is not me ripping on the older homes, but there's an old saying when we're talking about building construction is, they don't build them like they used to. Mm-hmm. And I always follow up with, thank God, that we don't build them like we used to. Because, when you're looking at it, and my house, too, is over 120 years old now. And, we have 2x8 floor joists. And Patrick was mentioning earlier to me that, well, wait a minute, we don't build with 2x8. No, not today. Everything is going to be minimum 2x10s, making sure everything's up to date. But we kept those 2x8 floor joists because we weren't changing anything, so we were allowed to keep it. But it's the span and everything else that comes in there. Then you're talking about a lot of tin-clad copper wire. Heck, that house probably didn't have electricity when it was first built. And in fact, I'm sure it didn't. And that was probably all lit with gas lamps.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't know this, but because of our construction with gas on the inside of the house and using gas lights in the house, that's how that whole conduit stuff started coming out with our electricity. So when they started electrifying these houses, they actually used the old gas pipes and they ran the wires and fished them through the wall, and they found out that this was a very safe method to go ahead and start doing electricity, and they started adding on to that. So just a little bit of, Charlie adding to some of that trivia there for you, but it's amazing.
My understanding also is that the conduit persists, perhaps in no small part because unions like to have all of that extra work to pipe a house rather than just staple a bunch of BX wire in, which is, probably just as safe as far as I know.
And I could talk about that all day long. So you'll hear three reasonings. Okay, so backing up a little bit, when we're dealing with conduit or pipe, in the United States, there's only 3 metropolitan areas that do that. It's New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. All right. And a lot of people will say it's because of the unions. Some people will say it's because of the Great Chicago Fire. And other people will tell me it's because of rats that are present there chewing through the wire and they want extra protection. However, as far as I'm concerned, we here in Chicago have some of the safest electrical work that's being done. Now, we still have work that gets done by amateurs, and because of which it's done wrong. But one unique recent code change that doesn't happen in Chicago, it's different than the suburbs, are the addition of arc fault circuit interrupters. All right, so a little bit of trivia. City of Chicago does not require arc fault circuit interrupters. All right, and they don't outlaw them. You can still put them in there. But the rationale is because everything's in pipe, we really don't have any sort of arc issues that come in there. We have some of the safest electric. So the contractors were able to keep that out of the building for now. So unique construction information that I get to share. So tell me more about that particular house, because I don't think I realized that the Goodman house was the one we were looking at. I knew it was big. I knew it was ornate. I believe that the person who was selling the house was a civil rights attorney and very well educated, very well respected, and I had the pleasure of having a short conversation with them. But tell me more about the house. I love the ballroom up on the top floor. That's so cool.
Yes, the sellers of that were Jim and Pauline Montgomery, and I don't know the year. I don't recall the year that they purchased the house, but they underwent a lot of structural work within the house. That's not to say that the people that bought it aren't doing a fair amount of work in there also, but it was a period of time where your home was representative of your wealth and status. Of the owners, and so there's a lot of beautiful wood paneling throughout the house.
Oh my God, yes, that I remember.
Yes, it's grand staircase going up. The ballroom is really the gem of the house, and then the grounds are extensive. I think what you find in Kenwood are lots that are 300 feet deep. So that's twice what a normal city lot is, and I believe that one's at least 100, maybe 125 feet wide.
I would
Wow.
say the 125, if not bigger.
Yeah,
It was very wide. It was almost like a double lot.
Oh, well, I
You
think
know.
it's like 6 lots.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say.
Good point.
If a lot is 25, yeah.
Right. It was done by an architecture firm, Treat and Foltz, at the time, and they were society architects. You went to them and they developed. It's kind of an Italianate style. It was built in the period where more was more, as opposed to less is more. There is stuff everywhere, and big festoon draperies. It's kind of fun because you can go online and you can find pictures of what it did look like when it was first furnished, and every single surface is covered with something.
No, that much I like. Susan, if somebody wanted to buy your books, give us the name and both books, and how do people get hold of these if they want to purchase these?
Well, the first book, is Chicago's Historic Hyde Park. That's available in most bookstores in the architecture section, or you can get it off of Jeff Bezos' site. And,
Yeah,
although I'd love you to go to a bookstore. We
I
do
was going to say, they
bookstores.
sell books?
they're not paying for the plug, so but
No?
y'all know who we're talking about.
And you were featured also, if I remember right, WBBM TV, Channel 11?
It was, WTTW Chicago Tonight did a...
Window to the World, that's Channel 11, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, Channel 11. And it was fun to do because the book came out in 2013. And it opens with Barack and Michelle, who live in Kenwood, leaving on January, whatever the date was, to go to Washington. And then 3 weeks later, the first family came home. And it just struck me that you're the most powerful man on the planet.
Yeah.
What are you doing back here? And that concept of home and what home means.
A little bit of trivia,
very
too, I'll
special.
add on to that. Michelle Obama is talking about 7 phases to the world. Michelle Obama's godmother lived directly behind me when I was living in Bolingbrook, and they would come and visit her once a year. And we didn't have a fence between our yards, and seeing that house surrounded with Secret Service and police and everything else, I'm just standing in my backyard, and of course I got a can of beer on my lawn furniture, and I'm like, this is cool, with all these dogs and everything else coming around. Patrick, tell us, how do people get a hold of you if they have any questions, please?
You can send me an email. My email address is patrick@loftus, LOFTUS.law.
Not law. And Joe, are you up for giving us some contact info for you?
Yeah.
I know I'm kind of leaving you out of the conversation a bit.
No, it's okay. Yeah, Joey Matthews, the VA loan nerd, 630-235-2405. Call or text anytime, including right now. Don't care.
Sounds good. I want to throw a plug out. We're getting all those videos Joey and I put together for the minimum property requirements. There's nobody else I know who is knowledgeable when it comes to loans for veterans, all right, and especially the whole VA loan process. Where other people have stumbled and failed, Joey ends up making all these things work. And I love the fact when I hear that he's never had a loan not close because of a paperwork issue that came in there. So that much I got to give him a super attaboy, and thank you for making those videos, and we're going to make those public on us. My name is Charlie Bellefontaine, and I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. Our website is www.thehomeinspectors, that's plural, and ORS, and it's a .com as well. Our phone number is 312-544-9180. And Joey, Patrick, myself, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to speak for Susan, and she could always go ahead and change it up on me. Everybody that's here always wants to help other people, and that's one of the things that we look for when we bring somebody on the show, is to be a true advocate. And granted, it is our business and what we do for a living, but please never be afraid to reach out to any one of these people. If you have any problems, any issues, anything else like that, they're going to be open. They're going to help, and that's just what everybody has, and I have great respect for all these people. So I'm sorry, do you want to add, Patrick? No?
No.
Okay, so then we're going right back to Susan again, and I, as much as I love that house, and I was so much hoping to see Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, when we were going down there to do the inspections, I think we probably might not have been able to get there if they were actually home. Is that?
The street has those, what do they call them, Jersey blocks?
Those barricades.
Yeah.
We had to do a serpentine to get into the block on the headquarters, but
right.
I guess there's more guards there when they're actually on premise.
Yeah, it was fascinating to be, to be living there when you had the President of the United States coming and going. And initially, the entourage would come down the block at not very high speeds. In fact, one year was my daughter's birthday. I forgot how old she was, and the kids were in the back, and he was in town for a fundraiser. And I'm like, "Come on, we're going to go out in the street and wave our flags." And of course, they all look at me like, "Oh, great." But they went out there, and sure enough, we're standing there in the cold, and the cars start speeding by, and all of a sudden they slow down, and he pops out, says "Happy birthday" to the kids, and gets back in his car, and like your face, yes. The government just stopped in front of our house, and off he went. And what a great moment and memory for those kids. Toward the end of his presidency, it was completely different. I mean, the entourage was twice as long. They came down our street at 60 or 70 miles an hour, and so things changed.
Things do change. I did have that option to shake Bill Clinton's hand one time when I was a fireman in Northbrook. I could picture the junior high school, but I can't think of the name of the junior high school. It's on Landwehr and Techney, I know that much. But they were rated the #1 junior high school in the nation. And of course, Hillary's family grew up in Park Ridge,
right,
and that's where they were from. So I figured they put it together for a way to visit her family and then come over and give this award for it being a presidential school. And being a paramedic at the time and on the ambulance, we actually had to be part of that motorcade. Which is cool. I don't know what else to say. And then he came out and we got to shake his hand.
Now, my story is a little bit different. We live on the route of the Thanksgiving Day parade, and I don't know if you know this, but Santa Claus is in that parade. So, it's not President of the United States. Didn't actually get to meet him, but Santa Claus did go and ride by on a float in front of where we live. Now, I will say one thing, though. My wife, pretty annoyed that Santa gets to ride on a float. Mrs. Claus has to walk.
That is rude.
She thinks that is sexist, and, well, how am I going to argue with that? So anyways, not a president, but he's an important dude.
There you
Did
go.
he recognize you, though? Did he ask you for your autograph? I mean, you are a star.
He looked over and he goes, "Yeah, that guy's getting cold."
That much I love it. But Patrick, there's something that I'm thinking about with these historic homes and buying these historic homes. There's got to be some legal problems and issues that come into play with something that's over 100 years old. What's your experience on that?
Well,
And Susan, help them out with these things if you can.
Yeah, to be honest, I reckon Susan knows more about this than I do. Every house, you need to do your due diligence. And especially in an older home, I mean, Charlie, with the inspection, you walk downstairs in the basement, you got a masonry foundation. It's something that needs to be taken into account if you're going to purchase that home. Otherwise, you're going to be in for probably some rude awakenings as time goes on.
Now, are you talking about maintenance issues, or are you talking about permit or legal issues?
I'm sort of attacking this from a couple different angles. So
Okay.
that's really one aspect of it, is that the expectation in an older home is that you're going to have some of these older building materials, building techniques, and to make sure that the client understands, you make them familiar so that they can bring that into the mix in terms of their evaluation. Now, when I get a contract in and it's for certainly a single-family detached home in the city of Chicago, one of the first things I do is I go on the building department website and I'll search the address and I'll see if there's any open building violations, what permits have been pulled, etc.
That's good advice.
If there's open building violations, we need to do some more investigation as to whether those have been resolved and just not updated on the city's website, or if those are still open, because again, that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Most of the time, a seller is not going to offer that information, just extemporaneously. It's either something you're going to have to draw out of them or learn on your own. And that's just the reality of it. I'm not trying to say that sellers are shady. It's just how it is.
And we don't know when they bought the house and when the work was done.
That's true. That's true. As often as not, if they bought the house 5 years ago, maybe you have a 10-year-old building violation. Their lawyer, when they bought it, didn't catch it. Well, I caught it. So that's one thing. And the older the home, of course, the more time that has passed that you could potentially have one of these issues. I mean, take, for example, maybe you've got a bungalow in Portage Park. This was the example I used earlier. And they built out the attic into a second floor. If they didn't get permits, that could be an issue going forward. If you've got a home that has all of the hallmarks of a recent renovation, and you go and you look on the website and you find that there's no record of permits being pulled, you've got to let the client know, because it's not a guarantee that this will happen, but it can happen, and I've seen it happen where the city comes back after the fact, and you're the owner now. You didn't do anything wrong, but you now own this home that has a bunch of unpermitted work done. The city doesn't care that it's not your fault. The city says there's not a permit. You need to pull the permit or put it back the way it was before. Now, you're not going to do that second one, because that doesn't make sense. You're going to have to do the first one. It's going to most likely require architectural plans, which are not cheap. Right. It's going to require all sorts of other stuff that is going to be very costly.
And especially if you got to go through zoning changes or anything else like that too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If you've got to go get a variance, for example, you don't have the proper setbacks on the front, back side, whatever it is, you start going down a very expensive rabbit hole. All things that, if you can discover before the buyer hands their money over, it can be very, very important. They may still decide to go forward with it for whatever reason, but
their choice.
They've been able to weigh that risk rather than have something come down on their head like a ton of bricks 6 weeks after they bought the place.
Yeah, that could be expensive. Susan, do you do more listings or sales?
In the last 2 years, I've done more sales.
More sales.
Yes.
Is that a process that you go through when you're taking somebody to show them that house? Do you want to look up past permits or something? Is that something?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
This is exciting to hear. Tell me more.
Well, when you're dealing with an older house, I mean, there's one thing that struck me in what you were saying, Patrick, and that is the importance of having a team that works together to look at these houses. Because if you're looking at 150 years of history, a whole lot has gone on to that structure in that period of time, and you want to go in with your eyes wide open. That had made selling sometimes more challenging in Hyde Park and Kenwood because of the age of our housing stock. However, what happened during COVID was that people recognized the importance of having these quirky spaces within a house where you may have that ballroom upstairs that now is the Lego room, or something else becomes an office. And the demand in those two markets was extraordinary over the past couple of years because of that. So buying a historic property does come with some challenges, and it's important that you have an agent that understands whatever the particular area is, whatever the building processes were during a particular period of time, that Charlie's business is of extraordinary importance. I was joking with him earlier. He's cost me a couple deals.
Oh, yeah, let's get that all out there, people.
No, but it was absolutely the right thing to do, because if you go into a house and there is a brick foundation and we can look at it and it's crumbling,
they need to know it needs to be parged.
They need to know that ahead of time, and they need to know what the costs associated with that are, because...
And the general maintenance that goes with it.
Right.
That's not just a repair.
Right.
A lot of that stuff ends up becoming ongoing, and especially when you're dealing with painting, wood exteriors. A lot of that stuff needs general maintenance. I'm sorry to jump on you.
No. I mean, some of it's obvious when you walk in the basement and you can see it. Some of it, in that particular house, we scoped the sewer, and guess what? The sewer didn't go anywhere. So, that's another $13,000 that, that people had to spend on that particular property. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a team that's really knowledgeable about the type of property that you're buying.
Yeah, and let me just, I want to highlight something you just said, because I think that it actually demonstrates the level of knowledge you have, and that is you walk in, you can see it, and it's obvious to you. And that is what's important when you are building the team that you just described, is that if I'm going to buy a house that has, well, I don't want to say that, right, let me just...
Has a unique quality.
Right. Who is better qualified than you to represent someone who is buying or selling a house that has these unique characteristics?
Thank you for that.
No, but it also goes back to the word assumptions, and I'm not going to use the ASS part, but that's the you, me afterwards when you assume things. And, whenever I do a lot of training of home inspectors as well, and we bring in outside experts when we do these training stuff. And I like to ask what many people think is a dumb question. And the whole reason why I ask that dumb question is because somebody doesn't know the answer. And to me, it's a good thing to talk up, or talk out, or walk it out, or talk it out, and come out there just to make sure that everybody's on the same wavelength when it comes to it. And the other thing, too, I like about what you're saying is getting a good team together. And even if it's somebody else that you haven't worked with before, just being able to have that openness and that dialogue. And Patrick, you could probably expound on this a little bit more. But there's a whole lot of communication that should be happening between all the advisors and the client. I don't think we should be talking about them behind their back, but we need to talk to each other. I know I get left out of the loop many of the times. But there's a lot of where are we, and get everyone on the same path.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it's vitally important, especially with these old properties. But with any property that you're buying, I mean, we act as advocates for the clients, each of us in our roles, and as much as you can communicate ahead of time, the better off we all are. There's always a surprise. There's always something that we can't see that we didn't uncover, but you really owe it to whoever you're working with to try to uncover as much as you can.
Yeah, the metaphor I suppose I would use is there's overlap in everything that we do. Mm-hmm. If we silo ourselves off from each other instead of maintaining a good line of communication, we're going to end up stamping on each other's toes. It's going to show on the other side, and it's going to make things go less smooth. It's going to be clunky. I'm going to be saying one thing, and the agent's going to be communicating something different, and it's going to result in a worse result for the client. And the more I do this, the more I have come to understand that we need to all be pulling in the same direction, not just be saying, well, I'm the lawyer, and I blah, blah, blah. I'm the agent, blah, blah. No, it's not like that. It's, maintaining those open lines of communication, and then deciding on a strategy. Okay, so you're going to handle this aspect of the negotiation. I'm going to be doing this on my side of things. You can have, communicate with the other agent in a certain way. The lawyers, we just square off with our swords and shields, whereas you guys are more able to, I know you hate this word, but finesse things.
You know what? But let's pull out some examples. I mean, you give me a 150-year-old house, I guarantee you those floors are not going to be leveled. They're going
right.
One section has settled one way or another. Even when we remodeled our home, we kept that unevenness in the floors. We got humps in the floors, and I like it. I purposely put our wood floors in so they would squeak. I did that on purpose because I'm an idiot, maybe, or I'm just an old historic nerd.
Or you can, when your children are leaving the house.
Oh yeah, sneaky. They're all adults now, but you are right, those teenagers. But actually, they're wonderful. They never did that.
Would it be rude to ask Joey a question, or is he not up for?
He'll be quiet if otherwise. Hit him up.
Joey, anything on your end when it comes to these historic homes?
We may have lost Joey then.
All right. Cool.
I'm checking with them. Yeah, we did lose
All
Joey.
right.
He must not be feeling too good where it comes in there.
Feel better.
Joey, go
You
take
know?
some NyQuil and we'll catch up with you next week.
But I do know with the historic homes with Joey, it depends if they're going, FHA or VA. Whenever and these size houses in those neighborhoods, Susan, those are not cheap homes by
Correct.
any means. And I know that I shouldn't say I know, but I'm guessing that it's somewhere around $750,000 that you could get an FHA or a VA. And VA could be more than that if they're a military vet. That I know. But there's things that they're looking for with the minimum property requirements that do come into play. What percentage of those homes do you think are wood-cladded exteriors?
Oh, there's quite a few.
Is there really? I was expecting that number to be relatively low. I thought it'd be all masonry or mostly masonry.
No, there's a combination because it depends again. This is a broad spectrum of time. So in 1870,
Good point.
it's frame construction, and there are streets that are 2 blocks of Kimbark are just all frame construction. So there's really a melange of product.
Yeah, I reckon that one of the attractive things about building a home in Hyde Park before it was annexed would be that you could build a frame home at that point after the fire.
Absolutely, but after the fire, a lot of you're correct. You're correct.
Yeah, there was considered a cheaper form of construction back then. After the fire, people were very afraid of it. Oh, you can't build out of wood; you got to build out of masonry, or brick, or concrete, or block.
Yeah, a lot of people couldn't rebuild their homes if they were within city limits because they couldn't afford to build a masonry home.
Right.
But I don't know if that was even in the city, back then.
No,
you know.
in 1871, it was a suburb.
It was a suburb.
And,
Exactly.
and that was my point, is that
Yeah.
because it was not within city limits at that point, you could
Right.
build a wood frame home.
Right. And
I did a little research on all that, and I was like, why did whatever Lincoln Park become Lincoln Park? Why do they name these neighborhoods what they were? And most of them were suburbs, is what it
Absolutely.
was. They weren't part of the city, where it came into it, and then they just stayed in with the neighborhood. But where I was going with this question beforehand and where Patrick was going, the minimum property requirements do require that everything stay well painted, that there's no bare wood, there's no peeling paint, there's no broken windows. But there's a lot of stuff with historic homes that, it's almost I want to put together a class for people to understand what should you expect. Like these homes are going to be drafty, all right, unless you go in there and you put new windows in. I remember before we did our house, you could fly a kite in my living room. I swear as God is my witness, But, I mean, what sort of things do you see that people need to expect that in an older home that they don't necessarily expect in a new construction home?
Charlie, there's such a spectrum of,
There is.
of how I could answer that. I mean, we're dealing with heating systems that started out being fireplaces to, being upgraded to radiators, and there's just such a variety, depending upon when the house was built. That's kind of hard to answer. I think,
Okay.
when you buy an older house, you have to be flexible.
I think you can expect very little insulation in the walls
Correct.
and the ceiling. I think
If
you can
any, in
expect,
some.
if any, good point. I think you can expect that there's going to be minimal outlets on the walls unless they've been added on
Correct.
afterwards. I think you can expect lead paint and lead water lines to be in those properties, and that doesn't mean that they're dangerous. There's ways to get around all that stuff. So, and uneven floors, brick foundations, parging that comes in there. Massive fireplaces is a big one, so we're big on chimney scans when it comes to that. Get a camera up in there and view the inside of it. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Susan, tell me more about the book and how do people get hold of you again?
I told you about the first book. The second book is Historic Illinois. People can get a hold of me at my website, S. O'Connor at bhhschicago.com, or my phone, is 312-883-9991.
883?
834, 9991.
All right, I got an 893-8144. Is that a different number?
No, you're right.
Oh, I got all scared there for a second. I thought I wrote the,
144.
all right, I got all scared that I wrote down the wrong
No,
number.
you got
So
it right.
312-893-8144.
8144.
Beautiful. Patrick, how do they get hold of you, please?
call or text 773-632-8330. If you are watching on YouTube, smash the like button.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Subscribe. Turn on the alerts. Please help us. We want to monetize this so I don't have to work anymore.
I love that. And then I don't want to forget Joey Matthews of the Federal Savings Bank. I'm always very thankful for the amount of knowledge that he adds here. And if you do have any questions about VA mortgages, FHA mortgages, quite frankly, any type of mortgage, he's got a pretty big team over there. And this is one of the most anal retentive, number crunching guys I've ever met. And he's going to put your client, I'm talking to real estate agents right now, he's going to put your client through the works right up in the beginning when he gets that pre-approval, because he doesn't want those things coming back. And once they get the pre-approval, it's pretty much a guaranteed approval is what he works with. So his phone number is 630-235-2405. Joey, I hope you feel better. And again, my name is Charlie. Our company is Chicagoland Home Inspectors, and our phone number is 312-544-9180. Our education site right now, it's mostly geared towards home inspectors, but we do want to open it up to real estate attorneys and quite frankly, homeowners as well. And we want to put as much free education as we can up there. So right now that's the Home Inspection University and Home Inspection University of Illinois. And the website is HIUIL, and that's a .com as well. So, Susan, we were talking about some of the common things that we would end up seeing in a house of something that's 100, 150 years old. Can you think of some of the problems you have when you're going through the attorney review period, the inspection contingency period, that 5-day window, when you start having, what do clients want to ask for typically when they see things?
Well, typically, everybody asks for something. I will say, however, in the last 2 years, that's been mitigated a bit by COVID and just the demand that's been out there. We were not a community that experienced a lot of multiple offers and a lot of cash offers, and that all changed.
That's surprising to hear. So you're telling me those two neighborhoods were, I've seen 20, 30 people bidding on a house, and they're giving their first born children away in order to get that home. That didn't happen down there, huh?
And not 20 or 30 people, no. It's a very unique community.
It is very big, high-end homes, and they are expensive.
Although it's a combination of homes. There are cooperatives that I sold one for $71,000. So there's a wide variety of what is available there. So yes, there are these big, magnificent structures, but there's a lot of condominiums and cooperatives that are in the more affordable range.
Now, when we're dealing with co-ops, though, a co-op is still a condo, but
no.
It's not.
It is not.
All right. No. Help educate me here.
It's a multifamily structure.
All right.
However, when you buy a cooperative, you're buying into a corporation, and you'll have an amount of shares within that corporation, and then you'll have a proprietary lease for your unit. So it's a different form of purchase, a different form of ownership. If you're in New York, it's quite common. Here, you'll get them on East Lakeshore Drive. Hyde Park has a number of them for, not quite sure why that is, but there are a number of buildings that are cooperatives.
The biggest thing I've learned or seen on those things is that the fee for the property is much, much lower.
Correct.
But your monthly payments, because taxes and a lot of other stuff are built into that, are going to be higher. Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement, yes.
Okay. As opposed to the difference with the condos, because you're going to be paying your own tax bill on a condominium on that property that you own, which is still a portion of the entire building's tax things. And Patrick, am I off base on this, or?
I'm just waiting for you guys to ask the lawyer about this because, just sitting back waiting. So co-ops, condominiums, believe it or not, are a fairly recent phenomenon. I want to say that they didn't really come into, their own until the 60s. So if you wanted to have like a collective ownership collective, it's sort of similar to the word co-op, but a co-op is effectively a condominium before condominiums actually existed. And what Susan said is correct. You've got, you're essentially, you're investing in a corporation, and that investment gives you the right to dwell in your unit. So it is different in structure. I don't fault you for thinking it's quite similar to a condominium. In many respects, it is from just the overall experience of it. You wouldn't necessarily notice that you live in a co-op versus a condominium, except when the monthly maintenance payments are due and you're paying $2,500 rather than $1,100, let's say. Just throwing numbers out there. I've handled a few co-op purchases and sales, and there's definitely its own niche. But I would say that if you're dealing with something that's a co-op as opposed to a condo, it's probably because it was constructed before condos were a thing.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end of it. I want to go through end of our show, so I want to go around the horn one more time. Susan, please give us the name of both of those books, and how do people get hold of you?
Chicago's Historic Hyde Park is the first book, and the second one that just came out is Historic Illinois, which takes us out of this great city that we're talking about. And it's been a fascinating ride doing this. People can get a hold of me at soconnor@bhhschicago.com. Or I'll give you my cell since I messed up my office number. 312-560-8186. Feel free to call or text.
Repeat that for me, will you please?
312-560-8186.
And Patrick, please.
You can email me, patrick@loftus.law.
Sounds good. And again, my name is Charlie Bellefontaine. We own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. If you got anything that's home inspection related or even any problems with your home, please feel free to reach out to me. Our phone number is 312-544-9180. If you press 2, and I'm available, that will actually come and ring my phone and you'll be able to get hold of me. All right. We do have, and one more thing about Joey Matthews and the Federal Savings Bank, another great asset. Use them, 630-235-2405. And anytime you're having any problems, especially with the minimum property requirements of an FHA or VA mortgage, he's going to end up being your go-to guy. Susan, give me one word of wisdom for anybody who's looking at going at an older house. What do you want them to work on? And we are short on time.
Patience.
Patience. I love that. There's nothing I love better than one-word answers when it comes to it. Patrick, same thing to you.
How do I follow that? I mean,
I don't know.
Perfect answer. So, yeah, patience, and I don't have one. I'm a lawyer. I don't do one-word answers, man. It depends is what my answer always is. Honestly, educate yourself first.
That's the key.
Don't walk in thinking you're going to see the things you would expect if it was a brand new constructed home. Embrace it. And really, what you're getting with a historic home is something that is unique. And with that comes unique challenges.
I love that.
Be prepared for it.
Very well said. So I want to give a few thank yous. One of them goes to Susan for being here. Thank you very much. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time out to be on the show with us. Number 2 is going to be Devin Tingle. He's our producer, and I love to give him an attaboy for coming out here. Number 3 is Bernie and Mrs. Loftus, our 2 members of our fan club. We give a shout out. And with that being said, my name is Charlie. You listen to WCPT AM 820. Enjoy the rest of the morning, and I am out.